The stars belonged to the old ones. For 3,000 years, three mighty empires had ruled the galaxy like gods among mortals. Every species that reached for the stars found the same truth waiting for them in the dark spaces between worlds. They were not alone, and they were not welcome. The Zephyrian hegemony controlled the northern spiral arms with minds that could crush ships from 1,000 miles away. Their warriors needed no weapons except their thoughts. They could reach into an enemy's brain and make them forget how to breathe. Their ships moved without engines, powered by the collective will of their crews. When they spoke, lesser species listened, because to anger a Zephyrian was to invite madness. In the eastern sectors, the Korthak Dominion built machines that made reality bend to their will. Their weapons fired bullets that existed in 7 dimensions at once. Their shields could turn solid matter into empty space with the flip of a switch. They had conquered death itself, uploading their minds into mechanical bodies that lasted forever. The Korthak believed that flesh was weakness, and they had cut that weakness away long ago. The southern regions trembled under the Veltar Collective, a swarm of creatures that shared one massive mind. When one Veltar died, 1,000,000 others felt its pain and grew stronger from it. They could predict every move their enemies would make because they thought with perfect unity. Their fleets moved like schools of fish, turning and striking as one living weapon. No force in the galaxy could match their numbers. These three empires had fought each other for centuries, but they had learned to respect each other's power. The galaxy was large enough for all of them, and there were always new species to conquer. They had divided the stars between them like slicing a cake, and for 1,000 years, this balance had held. Then humanity reached the stars. At first, the empires barely noticed. Humans had only developed faster than light travel 200 years ago. In galactic terms, they were infants taking their first steps. Their ships were crude metal boxes held together with bolts and hope. Their weapons shot simple projectiles, or basic energy beams. They had no psychic powers, no reality-bending technology, no hive mind to coordinate their actions. Captain Vexhai of the Zephyrian hegemony had been the first to encounter them. His scout ship had found a human colony, on the edge of known space, a small farming world called New Texas. The humans there had welcomed him with curiosity instead of fear. They had offered him food and drink, asked questions about his people, and shown him around their simple settlements. They are like children, Vexhai had reported to his commanders. Harmless and naive. They build their homes on the surface, instead of underground. They keep animals for food instead of growing meat in laboratories. They even have something they call art covering their walls. The Korthak had similar reports. Commander Unit 47291 had studied human technology and found it laughably primitive. Their computers use electricity instead of quantum matrices, it had calculated. Their engines burn chemical fuel like ancient rockets. Their weapons cannot even penetrate basic energy shields. They pose no threat to our expansion. Even the Veltar Collective had dismissed humanity after their first contact. The hive mind had tried to connect with human thoughts and found only chaos. Where other species had organized, logical thinking patterns, humans seemed to jump from idea to idea without reason. They cannot be controlled, the collective had decided, but they cannot resist us either. When we are ready, we will absorb them like all the others. For 2 centuries, humanity had spread slowly through their small corner of the galaxy. They built colonies on harsh worlds that other species had ignored. They traded peacefully with anyone who would talk to them. They even helped some younger species defend themselves against pirates and raiders. The 3 empires watched this expansion with mild amusement. Humans were useful in their own way. They made good farmers and miners. Their chaotic thinking sometimes produced interesting ideas that could be stolen and improved upon. They were like a garden that grew wild but produced useful fruits. But as the years passed, human space kept growing. Their colonies multiplied faster than anyone had expected. Their trade routes connected dozens of systems. Other species began looking to them for protection instead of the great empires. This was becoming annoying. The final straw came when humanity refused to pay tribute. Ambassador Korthak of the Zephyrian hegemony had arrived at Earth with a simple message. Your species, has grown large enough to matter, he had told the human leaders. You will now pay tribute to your betters. 1/3 of your production, half of your young people for our labor forces, and complete access to your territory for our ships. The human response had been unexpected. They had politely declined. We appreciate your offer, the human ambassador had said, but we prefer to remain independent. We're happy to trade with you as equals, but we won't become your subjects. Korthek had been so shocked he had forgotten to crush the human's mind. No species had ever refused tribute before. It was like watching an ant declare war on a giant. Similar scenes had played out with the other empires. The Korthak had demanded mining rights to human worlds and been told no. The Veltar had tried to establish breeding colonies in human space, and been politely but firmly asked to leave. The three empires had held an emergency meeting for the first time in 800 years. This cannot be allowed, Korthek had declared, his mental voice echoing through the council chamber. If humans are permitted to refuse tribute, other species will follow their example. Our authority will crumble. Agreed, Commander Unit 47291 had calculated. The human infection must be removed before it spreads. Their resistance corrupts the natural order. The Veltar Collective had spoken with 1,000,000 voices in perfect harmony. We have decided. Humanity will be divided between us. Their worlds will be harvested. Their people will serve or die. This matter will be ended quickly. And so the three greatest powers in the galaxy had formed their first alliance in 1,000 years. Each empire would contribute 1/3 of its fleet. They would converge on human space simultaneously, overwhelming Earth's defenses before humanity could even call for help. It would be a simple operation. Humans had perhaps 200 ships scattered across their territory. The combined alien fleet would number over 10,000 vessels. Each alien ship was more advanced than anything humanity had ever built. The war would last maybe a week. The alien commanders made their plans with casual confidence. They divided human territory between them like splitting a dinner bill. The Zephyrians would take the northern colonies for their agricultural resources. The Korthek would claim the industrial worlds in the center. The Veltar would harvest the population centers for new workers. Earth itself would be left as a monument to what happened when species forgot their place in the galaxy. None of them bothered to scout human defenses too carefully. What was the point? They had been watching humanity for 2 centuries. They knew exactly what the humans were capable of. This would not be a war. It would be an extermination. The alien fleets began moving toward human space like 3 great storms converging on a single point. Behind them, the galaxy held its breath. Everyone knew what was coming. The humans had been brave, but bravery meant nothing against overwhelming power. In the depths of space, the alien armadas prepared for the shortest war in galactic history. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in the Grand Council chamber of the Zephyrian mothership, surrounded by aliens who could kill her with a thought. The chamber was vast and filled with a strange blue light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Floating platforms held representatives from all 3 empires, their various forms creating a gallery of the galaxy's most dangerous beings. Elena kept her face calm, but inside her heart was racing. Not from fear, though, from excitement. Everything was going exactly according to plan. Human, spoke Korthek, his mental voice pressing against her mind like cold fingers. Your species stands at the edge of extinction. We offer you one final chance to surrender with dignity. Elena looked up at the floating platform where the Zephyrian ambassador hovered 3 feet off the ground. His people looked almost human, except for their pale blue skin and the way their eyes glowed with inner light. I'm listening, she said simply. Commander Unit 47291 spoke next, its mechanical voice echoing through translation devices. The Korthak looked like a cross between a spider and a computer, all metal limbs and glowing circuits where a face should be. The terms are simple. Total surrender. Your military forces will be dismantled. Your population will be relocated to labor colonies. Your worlds will be harvested for resources. The Veltar representative was the most disturbing of all. It looked like a mass of writhing tentacles covered in eyes, constantly shifting and changing shape. When it spoke, 1,000 voices whispered in perfect unison. Resistance is impossible. We have calculated every possible outcome. In each scenario, humanity ceases to exist as an independent species. Elena nodded slowly as if considering their words. And if we refuse? Then you die, Korthek said simply. We have assembled the largest fleet in galactic history, 10,000 ships from our 3 empires. Your entire military could not scratch the paint on our smallest vessel. I see. Elena pulled out a small device and set it on the table between them. Before I give you our answer, would you mind if I contacted Earth? My people deserve to know what decision I'm making. The aliens exchanged what might have been amused looks. Of course, Korthek said. Let them hear their doom from your own lips. Elena activated the device. The holographic image of Admiral Marcus Chen appeared, looking tired and worried. He was sitting in what appeared to be a military command center with other officers visible in the background. Elena, he said, please tell me you have good news. I'm afraid not, Marcus. Elena kept her voice steady. They're demanding total surrender, complete dismantling of our military, population relocation, resource harvesting. Admiral Chen's face went pale. How long do we have? They've given us 72 hours to evacuate our military installations, Elena said. After that, they begin their attack. Behind Elena, Korthek made a satisfied sound. The human leaders were reacting exactly as expected. Fear, desperation, the slow acceptance of defeat. But Elena wasn't finished. Marcus, I need you to activate Protocol 7. Admiral Chen blinked. Protocol 7? Are you sure? Completely sure. It's time. Understood. Protocol 7 is now active. Chen's image flickered and disappeared. The aliens barely paid attention to this exchange. Protocol 7 meant nothing to them. It was probably some last-ditch evacuation plan, or perhaps a way to hide civilian populations. It didn't matter. No human protocol could stand against the combined might of 3 empires. Elena turned back to face her captors. There's something you should know about humanity, she said calmly. And what is that? Commander Unit 47291 asked. We've been expecting this for a very long time. Light years away, Admiral Marcus Chen stood in the real command center of humanity's most secret military installation. The holographic conversation had been a performance carefully scripted and rehearsed. Chen wasn't on Earth at all. He was standing inside the bridge of the UES Leviathan, the largest warship ever built by human hands. Protocol 7 confirmed, he announced to his bridge crew. All stations prepare for Operation Event Horizon. Around him, hundreds of officers began working at their stations. The bridge of the Leviathan was the size of a football field, filled with the most advanced technology humanity had ever created. Holographic displays showed star maps, weapon systems, and the positions of ships scattered throughout the galaxy. Captain Sarah Walsh, Chen's second-in-command, approached with a datapad. Admiral, all Leviathan-class vessels report ready. We have 27 dreadnoughts in position. Chen nodded. 27 ships, each one larger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Each one carrying enough firepower to level a planet. And until this moment, they had been completely invisible to every sensor system the aliens possessed. What about the conventional fleet? Chen asked. Playing their part perfectly, Walsh replied. They're making all the right panicked movements. The aliens think we're preparing to evacuate. Chen walked to the main display, which showed the positions of the 3 alien fleets. They were massive beyond belief, stretching across light years of space. 10,000 ships, just as the ambassador had claimed. More firepower than had ever been assembled in galactic history. It should have been hopeless. Humanity's visible fleet numbered only 200 ships. Their technology appeared centuries behind the aliens. By every logical calculation, this should be a massacre. But the aliens had made one critical mistake. They had studied humanity for 200 years, but they had only seen what humanity wanted them to see. Admiral, reported Lieutenant Commander Jackson from the sensor station. The Korthak fleet is entering the outer system. The Veltar swarm is approaching from the south. The Zephyrian formation is maintaining position at the system edge. Perfect, Chen said. They're spreading out exactly as we hoped. Sarah, how long until they reach the kill zone? Captain Walsh checked her instruments. 18 hours, sir. Chen smiled grimly. For 2 centuries, humanity had played the role of the naive newcomers. They had built their visible ships to look primitive and crude. They had traded openly and peacefully, never showing any sign of military ambition. They had even helped other species, building a reputation as harmless idealists. But while the galaxy watched their public face, humanity had been preparing for war. The Leviathan-class dreadnoughts had been built in secret shipyards hidden in asteroid fields and empty star systems. Their technology came from 200 years of careful research, guided by one simple question. How do you kill something? Vastly more powerful than yourself? The answer was simple. You don't fight fair. Human scientists had studied every piece of alien technology they could get their hands on. They had identified weaknesses, developed countermeasures, and created weapons specifically designed to exploit those weaknesses. They had learned that Zephyrian psychic powers relied on quantum entanglement that could be disrupted. Korthak reality manipulation required dimensional stability that could be shattered. Veltar coordination depended on subspace, communication that could be jammed. More importantly, they had learned something the aliens never suspected. Humanity's chaotic thinking wasn't a weakness. It was their greatest strength. While other species followed predictable patterns, humans could think in ways that broke every rule of logic and strategy. Admiral, called out the communications officer. We're receiving a message from Ambassador Vasquez. Put her through. Elena's voice came through clearly, though she was still sitting in the alien council chamber. Marcus, they've accepted our surrender terms. They'll begin moving. Their fleet's into position tomorrow. Excellent work, Elena. How are our guests treating you? Like the primitive savage they think I am, Elena said with dark humor. They've been very polite about it, though. I think they actually feel sorry for us. Chen chuckled. They won't. For much longer. Safe travels, Ambassador. The connection ended. Elena would be returned to Earth in a few hours, giving her just enough time to get clear before the shooting started. Admiral, Captain Walsh said quietly. Are you sure about this? Once we reveal ourselves, there's no going back. The galaxy will know exactly what humanity is capable of. Chen looked out at the stars through the main viewport. Somewhere out there, 10,000 alien ships were moving toward Earth, confident in their overwhelming superiority. Their crews were probably laughing about the easy victory ahead of them. Sarah, he said, do you know why every human war ends the same way? How's that, sir? With our enemies realizing they never really knew us at all, Chen turned to address his bridge crew. All stations, this is Admiral Chen. In 18 hours, we're going to show the galaxy something they've never seen before. We're going to show them what happens when you corner the most dangerous predator in the universe. He paused, looking at each face on his bridge. These people had trained their entire lives for this moment. They were ready. We're going to show them why humanity has never lost a species-wide war. The alien armadas descended on the Sol system like 3 hurricanes converging on a single point. From the edge of space, the combined fleets looked like moving stars, their engines burning bright against the cosmic dark. 10,000 ships spread across millions of miles, each one carrying enough weapons to glass a continent. Admiral Kreshitar commanded the Zephyrian fleet from his flagship, the Mind's Edge. The massive vessel stretched for miles, its hull gleaming, with psychic amplifiers that could project his thoughts across entire star systems. Around him, his bridge crew floated in meditation pods, their minds linked together in perfect harmony. Status report, Kreshitar projected to his fleet commanders. All ships in position, came the response from Captain Velmoon of the Thought Destroyer. We have detected the human defense fleet, exactly 207 vessels, scattered throughout the inner system. Kreshitar allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The humans were reacting exactly as predicted. Their ships were in full retreat, pulling back toward Earth like frightened animals running to their den. Some were even broadcasting distress, calls begging for mercy that would never come. "Maintain formation," he ordered. "Let them run, it will make the final slaughter more amusing." Across the system, Commander Prime 88431 oversaw the Korthak advance from the bridge of the reality's end. Unlike the organic chaos of the Zephyrian ships, every surface of his vessel was perfectly ordered. Geometric patterns covered the walls, and the air hummed with the sound of quantum processors calculating 1 trillion possible futures every second. "Analysis complete," reported Subcommander 99672. "Human resistance capacity calculated at 0.003% effectiveness against our shields. Estimated time to total victory, 3.7 hours. "Acceptable," Commander Prime 88431 replied. "Begin preliminary bombardment of outer colonies. We will drive them toward the central system like prey toward a trap." The Veltar Collective needed no verbal communication. Their swarm moved with the fluid grace of a single organism, 10 million individual minds thinking as one. Their ships were living things grown rather than built, with hulls that pulsed, like heartbeats and weapons that fed on the fear of their enemies. The collective tasted the terror emanating from human space and found it delicious. Soon they would consume every human mind, adding their chaotic thoughts to the perfect order of the hive. The very chaos that made humans unpredictable would make them valuable slaves once properly controlled. On Earth, President Martinez stood in the emergency command bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Around her, the leaders of humanity watched the approaching doom on massive holographic displays. The alien fleets looked unstoppable, a tide of death rolling toward their small, blue world. "How long do we have?" she asked General Peterson. "At current speed, the first wave will reach Earth's orbit in 14 hours, Peterson replied grimly. "Our fleet is doing what it can to slow them down, but..." He didn't need to finish. Everyone in the room could see what was happening. Human. Ships were dying by the dozens, their weapons barely scratching the alien hulls. Each exchange saw 3 or 4 human vessels destroyed for every alien ship damaged. "Maybe we should consider surrender," suggested Secretary Williams. "If we give them what they want, maybe they'll spare the civilians." "No." The voice came from Admiral Chen, who had just entered the command center. He looked calm, almost relaxed, which seemed impossible given the circumstances. "Admiral," President Martinez said, "I thought you were coordinating the evacuation." "I was, but I wanted to be here for what comes next." Chen walked to the main display and studied the alien formations. 14 hours, you said?" "Give or take," General Peterson confirmed. Chen smiled. Perfect timing. Something in his voice made everyone in the room turn to stare at him. President Martinez had known Marcus Chen for 15 years, and she had never seen him look quite like this. There was something predatory in his eyes, like a wolf watching sheep walk into its territory. "Marcus," she said slowly, "what aren't you telling us?" Before Chen could answer, every screen in the command center suddenly went black. Then, one by one, they began showing new images. Instead of the approaching alien fleets, they now displayed what looked like empty space scattered with asteroids and cosmic debris. "Admiral," called out Lieutenant Torres from the communications station, "I'm receiving transmissions from everywhere. Our deep space monitoring stations are all reporting the same thing." "What thing?" Peterson demanded. Torres looked confused as she read her instruments. "Massive energy signatures appearing throughout the system, hundreds of them. They're bigger than anything we've ever seen." Chen walked to the main display and pressed a button. The image changed, showing a view of space near Jupiter. At first, it looked empty except for a few asteroids drifting in the distance. Then the asteroids began to move. What everyone had mistaken for space debris suddenly came alive with light. Massive shapes unfolded from what had appeared to be dead rock, revealing themselves to be ships beyond anything the human leaders had ever imagined. Each vessel was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that made their conventional fleet look like toys. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chen said quietly, "meet the Leviathan-class dreadnoughts, humanity's real military." President Martinez stared at the screen in shock. How many? 27, Chen replied. Each one carrying more firepower than our entire visible fleet combined. The revelation spread through the room like wildfire. Secretary Williams sat down heavily in his chair. General Peterson's mouth fell open. President Martinez felt her legs go weak. How long? She whispered. We've been building them for 70 years, Chen explained. Hidden shipyards in asteroid fields, secret research stations in empty star systems. The aliens have been watching us for 2 centuries, but they've only seen what we wanted them to see. On the screens, more Leviathan ships were revealing themselves throughout the solar system. They had been hiding everywhere, disguised as asteroids, space stations, even small moons. The aliens had flown right past them without a second glance. Admiral Kreshtar felt the first hint of unease when his psychic sensors detected something wrong. The space around his fleet, which should have been empty, was suddenly alive with massive energy signatures. What is this? He projected to his sensor operators. Unknown, Admiral, came the confused response. We're detecting ships where our scans showed nothing before. Big ships. Really big ships. Before Kreshitar could respond, space itself seemed to tear open around his fleet. Massive vessels emerged from what looked like solid asteroids, their hulls gleaming with unknown technology. Each ship was larger than his entire command squadron. Impossible, he whispered. Our sensors are perfect. We would have detected them. Commander, Prime 88431 was running similar calculations and reaching the same impossible conclusions. His quantum computers had mapped every object in the system down to the smallest debris. There had been no ships here, no energy signatures, no threats. Yet now his instruments screamed warnings as dozens of titanic vessels powered up weapons that bent space around them. His perfect calculations had been wrong, which should have been impossible. The Veltar collective experienced something it had never felt before: surprise. 10 million minds thinking as one had completely failed to detect the human trap. The chaos of human thought patterns had hidden preparations so thoroughly that even their perfect coordination had missed them. Admiral Chen's voice suddenly echoed across every communication channel in the system, broadcast on frequencies that cut through every type of jamming and encryption the aliens possessed. Attention, alien fleets. This is Admiral Marcus Chen of the Human Defense Force. You wanted to see what humanity is capable of when cornered. You wanted to test our resolve. The voice was calm, almost conversational, but there was something underneath it that made every alien commander feel a chill of fear. Tonight, you're going to learn something about my species. We've been preparing for this day since we first reached the stars. We've studied your technologies, your tactics, your weaknesses. We've learned everything about you. Across the system, the Leviathan dreadnoughts powered up their weapons. Energy readings spiked beyond anything the aliens had ever recorded. Space itself began to warp around the human ships as they prepared to fire. But most importantly, Chen continued, you're going to learn why humanity has never lost a species-wide war. You see, we don't fight fair. We don't follow your rules. And when someone threatens our home, we don't just defeat them. The first human weapons fired, and the aliens discovered what it meant to face an enemy that had spent 2 centuries preparing for this exact moment. We erased them. The night sky exploded into light as humanity's hidden fleet opened fire. The aliens had come expecting to fight a primitive species with crude weapons and simple tactics. Instead, they found themselves facing the most dangerous predators in the galaxy, armed with weapons that could bend reality itself. The night that shattered empires had begun. The first volley from the human Leviathan fleet shattered reality itself. Dark matter cannons fired streams of invisible death that didn't just destroy ships, they erased them from existence. Where proud alien vessels had been flying moments, before only empty space remained, not even debris to mark their passing. The weapons reached into the quantum foam of spacetime and simply deleted their targets from the universe. Admiral Kreshitar watched in horror as 3 of his heavy cruisers vanished without a trace. His psychic senses, which could normally detect the death screams of destroyed crews, felt nothing. The ships hadn't been destroyed. They had been unmade as if they had never existed at all. All ships, evasive maneuvers. He projected frantically. Deploy psychic shields. Prepare mind lances for... His orders cut off as the UES Leviathan itself targeted his flagship. The human dreadnought was a mountain of metal and energy, bristling with weapons that hurt to look at directly. When it fired its main gun, space, around the beam turned black, swallowing light itself. The Mind's Edge tried to dodge, but gravitational pulse weapons grabbed the Zephyrian flagship like a giant hand and held it in place. The dark matter stream struck the ship's psychic shields and passed through them as if they were made of paper. Kreshtar had time for one last thought before his consciousness was scattered across dimensions. The humans hadn't just built better weapons. They had built weapons specifically designed to kill his people. Across the battlefield, Commander Prime 88431 was making similar discoveries. His quantum calculations showed that the human weapons shouldn't exist. They violated fundamental laws of physics. Reality-warping beams that turned solid matter into empty space. Gravitational weapons that crushed ships into singularities. Energy fields that made his shields simply stop working. Analysis impossible, reported Subcommander 99672, panic creeping into its mechanical voice. Human technology operates on principles unknown to our databases. Our defenses are ineffective against... A human ship called the UES Voidbringer fired something that looked like a beam of pure darkness. When it struck the Korthak flagship Reality's End, the ship's quantum armor simply ceased to function. The hull began aging rapidly, metal corroding and systems failing as time itself accelerated around the vessel. Commander Prime 88431 had enough processing power to realize what was happening before his consciousness shut down forever. The humans had weaponized entropy itself. They were using the universe's own tendency toward chaos as a weapon. The Veltar Collective experienced something even worse. Confusion. For the first time in 10,000 years, the hive mind couldn't predict what would happen next. Human tactics made no logical sense. Their ships moved in patterns that looked random but somehow achieved perfect coordination. When the collective tried to use its psychic powers to coordinate its swarm, it discovered that the humans had deployed neural firewalls that turned mental attacks back on the attackers. Thousands of Veltar ships suddenly found their crews forgetting how to fly, how to breathe, how to think. But the worst part was the human battle cries. Every alien species fought in silence, or with formal battle chants. Humans screamed like wild animals, shouting things that made no tactical sense. For Earth, remember the Alamo, witness me, let's go get these bastards. The chaos was infectious. Other species that had been forced to serve the three empires began to remember what it felt like to fight for themselves instead of their oppressors. Captain Sarah Walsh commanded the UES Ragnarok, one of the newest Leviathan-class ships. Her vessel was engaging a Zephyrian battle group that should have been able to crush her with psychic attacks. Instead, she was systematically destroying them one by one. "Captain," reported her weapons officer, "the quantum torpedoes are performing beyond expectations. We're getting 340% efficiency on the dark matter projectors." "Good," Walsh replied calmly. "Target that command ship. I want to send a message." The Ragnarok's main weapon fired a beam that punched through dimensions. The Zephyrian command ship tried to flee into psychic space, a realm where physical matter couldn't follow. The human beam followed it anyway, reaching into the mental dimension and tearing the ship apart on 7 levels of reality. Walsh opened a communication channel to the surviving Zephyrian ships. "This is Captain Walsh of the Human Defense Force. Your commanders are dead. Your shields are useless, your weapons can't touch us. I'm giving you 30 seconds to surrender or withdraw." The Zephyrian response came in the form of desperate psychic attacks against her crew. The aliens tried to drive the humans insane with visions of terror and despair. Instead, they discovered that human minds were already so chaotic that madness just made them fight harder. 30 seconds are up," Walsh announced and resumed firing. Admiral Chen watched the battle from the bridge of the original Leviathan, humanity's first and largest dreadnought. Around him, his crew worked with calm efficiency that would have impressed even the Korthak. But unlike alien crews, they smiled while they worked. Some even hummed old songs from Earth. "Admiral," reported Captain Torres from the tactical station. The alien formations are beginning to collapse. They're taking massive casualties and can't coordinate their response. How are our losses? Chen asked. We've lost 3 Leviathan ships, Torres replied, but we've destroyed over 8,000 alien vessels. The ratio is roughly 3,000 to 1 in our favor. Chen nodded. Better than expected, but each Leviathan that died represented thousands of human lives. What about their flagships? All 3 Empire command ships are confirmed destroyed, sir. We're reading total chaos in their communication networks. Through the main viewport, Chen could see the battle raging across the solar system. Human ships moved like wolves through a flock of sheep, their weapons carving holes in reality itself. The aliens had come expecting a massacre and they were getting one. Just not the kind they had planned. Admiral, called Lieutenant Jackson from communications. We're receiving surrender requests from over 200 alien ships. They're asking for quarter. Chen considered this. The smart play would be to accept their surrender and begin negotiating a peace treaty. Humanity had made their point. The galaxy would never underestimate them again. But Chen remembered the alien ultimatum: total surrender, population relocation, resource harvesting. They had come to commit genocide, and they had expected to enjoy it. Tell them this, Chen said, calmly. Any ship that powers down its weapons and withdraws from the system will be allowed to leave. Any ship that continues fighting will be destroyed. Any ship that tries to attack our colonies or civilian targets will be hunted down and erased from existence. And if they ask for terms? Jackson inquired. Terms? Chen smiled coldly. They can have the same terms they offered us. Total surrender. The message went out across all frequencies and the response was immediate. Alien ships began powering down their weapons and turning away from Earth. But many others, driven by pride or desperation, continued fighting. Those ships learned what it meant to face human weapons designed by a species that had perfected warfare. Through 10,000 years of constant conflict, the Zephyrians discovered that their psychic powers were useless against minds that had developed defenses over millions of years of evolution on a chaotic world. Humans had been dealing with mental stress, fear, and confusion since before they had language. Alien mind control attempts just made them angry. The Korthak found that their reality-warping technology was worthless against enemies who refused to accept reality in the first place. Human weapons worked on principles that shouldn't exist, powered by a stubborn refusal to admit that something was impossible. The Veltar learned that their perfect coordination was actually a weakness when, facing an enemy that thrived on chaos, human tactics made no sense because they were designed by a species that had never followed anyone else's rules. By the time the sun rose over Earth, the greatest military force in galactic history had been shattered. Of the 10,000 ships that had entered the solar system, fewer than 2,000 escaped. The rest had been destroyed, captured, or were drifting powerless in space. The 3 empires that had ruled the galaxy for 3 millennia were broken. Their fleets were scattered. Their command structures were in ruins. Their authority was gone. And in the depths of space, Admiral Chen opened a communication channel that would reach every inhabited world in the galaxy. This is Admiral Marcus Chen of the Human Defense Force, he began. Last night, 3 empires came to destroy my people. They failed. They failed because they made the same mistake that every enemy of humanity has made throughout our history. He paused, looking out at the wreckage of the alien fleets. They forgot that the most dangerous animal is the one that fights for its home. The galaxy woke up to a universe turned upside down. Admiral Chen's transmission had reached every world, every space station, every ship between the galactic core and the outer rim. The message was simple, broadcast in 300 languages, but its meaning echoed across 1,000 civilizations. The 3 great empires were finished. On Zephyr Prime, the homeworld of the hegemony, billions of psychic minds fell silent as the news arrived. The Great Council chamber, where the ruling minds had gathered for 3,000 years, stood empty for the first time since the planet's civilization began. Half the council members had died with the fleet. The survivors were too shocked to think clearly. Elder Kestar, the oldest living Zephyrian, floated alone in the center of the vast chamber. His ancient mind, which had guided his people through countless wars and victories, struggled to understand what had happened. Impossible, he whispered to the empty air. Humans are children. They barely understand fire, much less the deeper sciences. But the evidence was undeniable. The hegemony's first fleet, their most powerful armada, had been destroyed in a single night. Not defeated, destroyed. Most of the ships hadn't even left wreckage behind. On the industrial worlds of the Korthak Dominion, mechanical minds processed the same impossible data. Their quantum computers ran the calculations over and over, seeking an error in the math. There had to be a mistake. The humans couldn't have weapons that advanced. Their technology was centuries behind Korthak science. Supreme Logic Unit 11001 stood in the central processing chamber of their capital world, surrounded by the humming of 1,000,000 quantum processors. For the first time in its 1,000-year existence, it couldn't find a logical explanation for observed events. Analysis complete, it announced to the empty chamber. Its voice echoed off metal walls that had never heard doubt before. Conclusion: previous analysis of human capabilities was fundamentally flawed. Recommendation: complete revision of strategic doctrine. But there was no one left to hear the recommendation. The Dominion's leadership had died with their fleets, their consciousness uploaded into the command ships that humanity had erased from existence. The Veltar collective experienced something worse than confusion or logical failure. For the first time in their species' history, the hive mind was broken. Too many individual Veltar had died too quickly for the collective to process their deaths. The shared consciousness that had guided them for 10 millennia was fragmenting into millions of separate, terrified minds. On their breeding worlds, newly individual Veltar stumbled around in shock, suddenly forced to think for themselves without the comforting presence of the hive. Some went insane from the isolation. Others discovered something they had never experienced before: personal freedom. But the real changes were happening on the thousands of worlds that had served the three empires. Species that had been conquered centuries ago suddenly found themselves free. The tribute collectors didn't come. The occupation forces were gone. The fear that had ruled their lives for generations simply stopped. On Tarika IV, a farming world that had fed Zephyrian colonies for 200 years, the local population gathered in the planetary capital to watch the human transmission. Governor Hesychon, a mid-level Zephyrian administrator, stood before the crowd with his usual arrogance. "This changes nothing," he declared. "The hegemony will rebuild. New fleets will come. You will continue to serve as you always have." The crowd was silent for a long moment. Then someone in the back began to laugh. The laughter spread through the gathering like wildfire until thousands of voices joined in. "No," said Marek, a farmer, who had never spoken to authority before. "I don't think we will." When the riot ended 3 hours later, there were no Zephyrian administrators left on Tarika IV. The planet declared independence and began preparing to defend itself. Similar scenes played out on worlds throughout the galaxy. The great empires had ruled through fear and overwhelming force. With their fleets destroyed and their leaders dead, that fear evaporated like morning mist. Ambassador Elena Vasquez returned to Earth 12 hours after the battle ended, traveling in a small diplomatic shuttle that had been ignored during the fighting. She landed at Geneva Spaceport to find crowds of people celebrating in the streets. The news of humanity's victory had spread across Earth faster than official channels could control it. Elena made her way to the Emergency Command Center, where she found President Martinez and the rest of the human leadership still trying to process what had happened. "Elena," the president said, rising from her chair, "thank God you're safe. How are the aliens treating surrender negotiations?" Elena smiled grimly. "There are no surrender negotiations, Madam President. The three empires have effectively ceased to exist as political entities." She activated a portable holographic display that showed the current state of galactic politics. Where the map had once shown 3 great empires controlling most of known space, it now showed hundreds of independent worlds, scattered remnants of imperial forces, and vast regions of space, with no government at all. The Zephyrian hegemony has lost 70% of its military forces and most of its leadership, Elena explained. The remaining council members are too busy fighting each other for control to threaten anyone else. The Korthak Dominion has ceased to function as a unified entity. Their quantum communication network collapsed when we destroyed their command vessels. Individual worlds are cut off from each other and reverting to local government. The Veltar Collective has experienced a psychological breakdown. The hive mind has fragmented into millions of individual consciousness. Most of their military forces are too confused to follow orders. President Martinez sat down heavily. So we won. We did more than win, Elena replied. We accidentally liberated half the galaxy. Over the following weeks, humanity found itself in an entirely unexpected position. Instead of being conquered, they were being asked to lead. Delegations arrived from dozens of worlds, seeking protection, trade agreements, and military alliances. Admiral Chen, now promoted to Supreme Fleet Commander, established the first truly galactic communication network. Unlike the Empire's systems, which had been designed to control information, the human network was open to all species. We're not here to rule you, Chen announced in his first galactic address. We're here to make sure no one else does either, Theo. Response was overwhelming. Within months, over 300 worlds had signed the Free Worlds Charter, a loose alliance dedicated to mutual defense and open trade. Unlike the Empire's tribute systems, the charter required no payments or forced labor. Member worlds contributed what they could and received protection in return. But not everyone was happy with the new order. Remnants of the three empires began, forming alliances of their own, determined to restore their lost power. Pirates and raiders, no longer kept in check by Imperial forces, began attacking undefended worlds. Chen anticipated this. The Leviathan fleet had been built not just to fight one war but to maintain peace afterward. Human ships began patrolling trade routes and responding to distress calls from any species that requested help. The galaxy learned that humans approached peacekeeping the same way they approached war, with overwhelming force applied precisely where needed. When a group of Korthak separatists tried to reclaim their homeworld by enslaving the local population, 3 human dreadnoughts appeared in orbit within hours. The separatists surrendered without firing a shot. When Zephyrian raiders began attacking Veltar refugees who were trying to establish independent colonies, human ships tracked down the raider base and erased it from existence. The message was clear. The age of predatory empires was over. 5 years after the night that shattered empires, Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood once again before an alien council. But this time, she wasn't facing conquerors demanding surrender. She was addressing the First Galactic Assembly, where representatives from over 1,000 worlds had gathered to discuss trade, defense, and exploration. Fellow beings, she began, speaking to an audience that included former enemies and new allies alike. 5 years ago, we proved that no single species has the right to rule over others. Today, we take the next step toward a galaxy where every world has a voice. In the audience, she spotted some familiar faces. Elder Kessitar of the Zephyrians sat in the section reserved for reformed imperial worlds. His people had struggled to adapt to democracy, but they were learning. Supreme Logic Unit 11001 represented the new Korthak Federation, their worlds now governed by collective decision-making rather than quantum calculation. Even some Veltar were present, though they still struggled with individual consciousness. They were slowly learning to work together without the old hive mind, discovering that cooperation was possible without total unity. The empires fell because they forgot a simple truth, Elena continued. The galaxy doesn't belong to the strong. It belongs to everyone. Back on Earth, Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck of the Luna Orbital Station, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships were patrolling trade routes, protecting colonies, and keeping the peace. The Leviathan fleet had grown to over 100 vessels, each one a reminder that humanity would never again allow tyranny to take root in their galaxy. Captain Sarah Walsh joined him at the viewport. Admiral, we've received a report from the Andromeda expedition. They've made contact with another galactic civilization. Chen raised an eyebrow. Friendly contact, I hope? They seem peaceful enough, Walsh replied. But they're curious about our weapons technology. Apparently, they've never seen anything quite like our dark matter cannons. Chen smiled. I'm sure they haven't. Send them a message. Tell them we're always happy to make new friends, but also make sure they understand. Sir? Chen's expression grew serious as he looked out at the stars that humanity now protected. Make sure they understand that the galaxy has new guardians now, and we don't play by the old rules. The message would spread, as it always did. The stars species would learn the lesson that 3 empires had learned too late. Humanity had come to the galaxy in peace, but they were prepared for war. They had beaten the strongest powers in known space, not through superior numbers or advanced technology alone, but through the simple determination never to bow to those who would rule over others. The age of empires was over. The age of freedom had begun. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, human ships continued their eternal patrol, ready to remind anyone who forgot why the night that shattered empires was called the night that changed everything.